I still remember the exact moment everything changed. My hands were deep in soapy water, scrubbing at a casserole dish while watching my mother-in-law Eleanor through the kitchen window. She was pushing my 5-year-old Jack on the swing, her silver hair catching the late afternoon sunlight. Her laugh carried across the yard, genuine, warm, as my son giggled with delight. It was a beautiful moment, one that made my heart swell, completely unaware that in less than 24 hours, our family would be shattered beyond recognition. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The phone call came at 10:43 p.m. on a Tuesday. Thomas, my husband, of 11 years, was working late again. The kids were finally asleep after I'd spent an hour soothing Lily through her math homework anxiety and another 30 minutes convincing Jack that monsters definitely weren't living in his closet. I was exhausted, scrolling mindlessly through social media when an unknown number lit up my screen. I almost didn't answer. Almost. "Hello?" I said, expecting a telemarketer or wrong number. "Is this Rachel?" The woman's voice was sharp, confident, with an edge that immediately made me sit up straighter. "Yes, who's calling?" "I'm Vanessa. I think it's time we talked about Thomas." My stomach dropped, a cold wave washing over me. "I'm sorry, who are you exactly?" A small laugh, almost pitying. "I've been seeing Thomas for almost 18 months now. I thought it was time we cleared the air, especially since he's told me he's planning to leave you after the holidays." The room started to spin. 18 months. 18 months while I'd been raising our children, maintaining our home, supporting his career, and believing his excuses for late nights and weekend emergencies at the office. "This is ridiculous," I managed, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the earthquake happening inside me. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but—" "Check his second phone," she interrupted, "the one he keeps in the black case in his gym bag. Password is Jack's birthday. Oh, and you might want to look at the credit card statements for the account you don't know about, the one he opened last spring." Before I could respond, she added, "Look, I'm not trying to hurt you. I actually feel sorry for you. But he's been stringing us both along, and frankly, I'm tired of waiting. He needs to make a choice." I hung up, my whole body trembling. Surely this was some cruel prank or a vindictive colleague trying to cause trouble. Thomas and I had built a life together. We had Lily and Jack. We had Sunday dinners with his parents and summer vacations at Lake Geneva. We had a mortgage and matching coffee mugs and 11 years of memories. But I also had doubts that had been growing like shadows as the months passed. The unexplained charges, the emotional distance, the decreased intimacy, the constant work emergencies. Little things I'd brushed aside, made excuses for, swallowed down with my pride. I found myself moving on autopilot to the garage where Thomas's gym bag sat on a hook. The black case was tucked in an interior pocket, just as she'd said. The phone inside unlocked with Jack's birthday. And there it all was. Hundreds of text messages, photos no wife should ever see of her husband with another woman, hotel receipts, restaurant bills, even a saved link to apartment listings downtown. I sat on the cold garage floor until my legs went numb, scrolling through the evidence of my husband's double life. At some point, I must have found the credit card statements on his laptop, confirming monthly charges at restaurants I'd never visited, jewelry stores where I'd received no gifts, weekend getaways during his business trips. By the time headlights swept across the driveway around midnight, a strange calm had settled over me. The initial shock had crystallized into something harder, colder, more resolute. I'd always considered myself a peacekeeper, someone who avoided confrontation at all costs. But as I heard his key in the front door, I realized that woman no longer existed. "Rachel?" Thomas called, sounding surprised to find me sitting at the kitchen table. "What are you doing up so late?" I looked up at my husband, This man I'd loved for over a decade, the father of my children, now suddenly a stranger, and placed his second phone on the table between us. His face drained of color so quickly I thought he might faint. "I can explain," he started, the most predictable line in the history of caught cheaters. "Vanessa called me tonight," I said quietly. His eyes widened. "She what?" "She seems nice, very helpful, shared lots of information." My voice was unnervingly calm. 18 months, Thomas, while I was raising our children, while I was supporting your mother through her cancer treatments, while I was putting my own career on hold so you could chase that promotion. Rachel, please, it's not what you think. She's obsessed with me. I've been trying to end things. Stop. I held up my hand. I've seen everything. The texts, the pictures, the weekend trips, the apartment listings. Each word felt like glass in my mouth, but I forced myself to continue. I don't recognize you anymore. I don't think I've known you for a very long time. He sank into a chair, his face in his hands. I never meant for this to happen. It was just supposed to be a one-time thing, but then it got complicated. Complicated, I repeated, the word hollow and insufficient. Well, I'm about to make it very simple. You have 30 minutes to pack a bag and leave. Tomorrow, you'll call your parents and explain exactly why you won't be at Sunday dinner. You'll tell them the complete truth, not whatever version makes you look best. His head snapped up. You can't be serious. My mother is still recovering. This would destroy her. And there it was. His first concern wasn't our children, our marriage, or my heartbreak. It was his reputation with his parents. Your mother deserves the truth just like I did, I said. And as for the children, you'll figure out a way to explain to them why Daddy doesn't live here anymore, because I refuse to lie for you. He stood up, anger replacing his initial shock. This is my house too. You can't just kick me out. Actually, I can. Because if you're not gone in 30 minutes, I'm calling Vanessa back and inviting her to join us. I think we have a lot to discuss, don't you? And after that, I'll be calling your boss. You know, the one whose wife you told me you had dinner with last month. I wonder how he'd feel knowing you used his name as an alibi while you were actually with your girlfriend. The color drained from his face again. You wouldn't. 18 months, Thomas. 18 months of lies. Try me. He blinked, suddenly seeing me, really seeing me, perhaps for the first time in years. Without another word, he turned and headed upstairs. 28 minutes later, he was gone. I didn't cry that night. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, making lists, planning conversations, calculating finances. Something fundamental had shifted inside me, a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just about Thomas's betrayal. It was about reclaiming my own worth after years of slowly disappearing into the background of my own life. When Lily and Jack bounded downstairs for breakfast the next morning, full of energy and innocent questions about where Daddy was, I gave them the simplest truth I could. Daddy and Mommy need some time apart to figure things out. He loves you very much and will see you soon, but he's staying somewhere else for now. The questions kept coming throughout the day, becoming harder to answer as their little minds worked to understand this sudden change. But it was the call from Eleanor, my mother-in-law, that I was dreading most. When my phone rang that afternoon, and her name appeared on the screen, I took a deep breath before answering. Rachel, dear, Eleanor's voice was tight with concern. Thomas just called with the most bizarre story. He said you've kicked him out of the house? There must be some mistake. I closed my eyes, steadying myself. Did he tell you why, Eleanor? A pause. He mentioned some misunderstanding about a work colleague. He said you jumped to conclusions and wouldn't let him explain. Of course he'd minimized it. Of course he'd made me sound irrational. Eleanor, I said carefully, Thomas has been having an affair for the past 18 months. I have seen the Evidence myself. There is no misunderstanding. The silence that followed was deafening. I don't believe it, she finally said. There must be some explanation. Thomas wouldn't. His girlfriend called me herself, I interrupted, the words still burning as they left my mouth. She's tired of waiting for him to leave me. Another long silence. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, well, I'm sure if there was, indiscretion. You two can work through it. Marriage isn't always easy, Rachel. Sometimes we have to forgive difficult things. My grip tightened on the phone. This isn't a one-time mistake, Eleanor. This is a deliberate double life he's been living while I've been taking care of his children and supporting his career. All marriages have rough patches, she continued as if I hadn't spoken. Harold and I certainly had ours. The important thing is to keep the family together. Think of Lily and Jack. I was thinking of them. I was thinking of the example I would set by staying with a man who had so thoroughly betrayed our family. I was thinking of the slow death of my own spirit if I accepted this as my life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Eleanor, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I understand this is difficult to hear about your son. I know you love him. But right now, I need to do what's best for myself and my children. And that means Thomas needs to face the consequences of his choices. This isn't like you, Rachel, she said, her tone hardening. You've always been so reasonable, so understanding. And suddenly I realized what she meant. I'd always been accommodating. I'd always put everyone else's needs before my own. I'd been the perfect daughter-in-law who never made waves, who took on more than my share to keep the peace. People change, I replied simply. Sometimes they have to. Well, she said after a moment, I assume this means you won't be joining us for Sunday dinner this weekend. I think that would be best, yes. And the children? Surely you won't keep them from their grandparents over this situation. I hesitated. Despite everything, Eleanor and Harold had always been loving grandparents. I'll bring them by for a short visit on Saturday afternoon, I offered. But I think we all need some space right now. She agreed, though reluctantly, and we ended the call with a formality that had never existed between us before. As I set down the phone, I felt a strange mixture of guilt and relief. The relationship I'd built with my in-laws over the past decade was likely changed forever, but so was I. The next morning, I dropped the kids at school and drove to meet with a divorce attorney, the first concrete step in my new reality. As I sat across from her desk, explaining the situation, I was surprised by how clear-headed I felt. So you have evidence of the affair, the attorney Ms. Patel confirmed. That's good. And the separate credit card and potential hidden assets, also helpful to know about early in the process. What should I expect? I asked. I've been a stay-at-home mom for the past 5 years. Before that, I worked in marketing, but I gave it up when Jack was born. She nodded. We'll need a complete financial picture, for starters, and you should prepare yourself. These situations can get messy when the initial shock wears off and reality sets in. What do you mean? Right now, your husband is probably still in panic mode, which might make him more amenable to reasonable terms. But once he starts thinking about the financial implications, child custody arrangements, and yes, pressure from his family, things could change. I hadn't considered that. In my mind, the hardest part was already over. Discovering the truth and confronting Thomas. But Ms. Patel was right. This was just the beginning. By Friday, Thomas had started texting, asking to talk, saying he'd made a terrible mistake and wanted to come home. I didn't respond. On Saturday morning, he called 5 times before I finally answered. Rachel, please, he began without preamble. I've ended things with Vanessa completely. I told her I made a mistake and that my family comes first. That's between you and her, I replied coolly. It doesn't change anything between us. How can you say that? 11 years of marriage and you're throwing it away without even trying to fix things? The audacity almost made me laugh. I wasn't the one who threw it away, Thomas. You did that all by yourself, one lie at a time. People make mistakes, he insisted. I'm owning up to mine. I'm trying to make it right. The time for that was 18 months ago, or any day since then when you chose to continue lying. He was quiet for a moment. My mom called me. She said you're bringing the kids by today. Yes, for a brief visit. I'll be there too. I have a right to see my children. I closed my eyes, counting to 10 silently. Fine, but this isn't the time or place to discuss our marriage. This is about the kids seeing their grandparents. And their father, he added pointedly. Yes, I conceded. And their father. When I arrived at Harold and Eleanor's house that afternoon with Lily and Jack, the tension was palpable behind Eleanor's welcoming smile. The children, oblivious to the undercurrents, ran to their grandmother for hugs before racing off to find the cookies she always kept for them. They've missed you, I said, attempting normalcy. Eleanor nodded stiffly. We've missed them too. She hesitated. Rachel, about our conversation. I've had some time to think. She was interrupted by the sound of the back door opening. Thomas appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. The children squealed with delight, running to him for hugs, and for a moment, watching him embrace them, I felt a stab of doubt. Was I doing the right thing, breaking up our family? Then I caught Eleanor's expression, a mixture of relief and triumph, and I understood. She still believed this was a temporary situation, a rough patch we would overcome, that her son would be forgiven and everything would return to normal. Kids, why don't you go find Grandpa? Eleanor suggested. I think he's setting up that new train set in the den. Once they were gone, she turned to us with an air of determination. Now, I think the three of us need to have a calm, rational discussion. Thomas looked hopeful. I felt a creeping sense of dread. Eleanor, I began. I appreciate. Let me speak first, she interrupted, taking a seat at the kitchen table and gesturing for us to do the same. I've been thinking about this situation, and while I don't condone what Thomas did, I believe strongly in the sanctity of marriage and the importance of family. Thomas nodded eagerly. Exactly, Mom. That's what I've been trying to tell Rachel. Marriage takes work, Eleanor continued. It takes forgiveness and compromise. Harold and I have been married for 42 years, and believe me, we've weathered our storms. I wondered briefly if Harold had ever conducted an 18-month affair while lying to her face every day. Somehow I doubted it. With all due respect, I said carefully, this isn't about the sanctity of marriage. This is about trust and respect, both of which Thomas deliberately violated. Eleanor's expression hardened slightly. You know, Rachel, marriage isn't just about feelings. It's about commitment through difficult times, for better or worse, remember? I don't think for worse was meant to cover deliberate, sustained betrayal, I countered. People make mistakes, she insisted. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, or saying something hurtful in an argument, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. What Thomas did was make thousands of consecutive choices to lie, cheat, and betray his family. Thomas leaned forward. Rachel, I know I hurt you, and I'm truly sorry, but Mom's right. We took vows. Don't those mean anything to you? The irony of him invoking our wedding vows was almost too much to bear. Before I could respond, Eleanor reached across the table and patted my hand in a gesture that felt more condescending than comforting. Dear, I know you're hurt and angry right now. That's perfectly natural. But you're young. and perhaps you don't understand yet that sometimes we have to put aside our pride for the greater good of the family." I withdrew my hand. "This isn't about pride." "Isn't it?" she challenged. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're letting your wounded feelings override what's best for your children." Something snapped inside me. What's best for my children is having a mother who respects herself enough not to accept betrayal and lies. What's best for them is seeing that actions have consequences, even for the people we love. Eleanor's eyes widened, clearly not used to me pushing back. Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I understand you're upset," Eleanor tried again, her voice taking on that soothing tone she used with the children. "But Thomas has admitted his mistake. He's ended the relationship. He wants to come home and be a proper father and husband. Again." "After he was caught," I pointed out. "Not because he came to his senses on his own." "Does it matter?" Thomas interjected. "The point is, I want to fix this." I looked between them, my husband and his mother, united in their conviction that his behavior, while regrettable, was ultimately forgivable and forgettable, that I should be grateful for his change of heart, rather than questioning why it took getting caught to prompt it. "You know," I said slowly, "for years I've tried so hard to be the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law. I've swallowed my opinions, adjusted my expectations, excused inexcusable behavior, all to keep the peace. But I can't do it anymore." Eleanor frowned. "No one asked you to be perfect, Rachel." Maybe not in those words, but every time I expressed a need or a concern that inconvenienced anyone else, I was made to feel selfish. Every time I stood up for myself, I was being difficult. So I learned to stay quiet, to put myself last, to accept less than I deserved. Thomas had the decency to look away, but Eleanor's frown only deepened. "That's simply not true," she insisted. "We've always treated you like family." "Like a certain kind of family member," I corrected. "The kind who's expected to bend until she breaks." The back door opened again, and Harold appeared with Lily and Jack trailing behind him. "Train's all set up," he announced cheerfully before reading the room. "Everything okay in here?" "We're just having a discussion," Eleanor said tightly. Harold looked between us uncertainly. "Kids, why don't you go try out that train? I'll be right there." After they left, he took in our expressions. "What's going on?" Eleanor straightened up. "We're trying to help Rachel see reason about this. Separation nonsense. I was just explaining the importance of family and forgiveness." Harold glanced at me, then at his son. "What exactly are we forgiving here?" An uncomfortable silence fell. Clearly, Eleanor hadn't shared the full story with her husband. "Thomas has been having an affair," I said plainly. "For 18 months. His girlfriend called me 4 days ago." Harold's expression darkened as he turned to his son. "Is this true?" Thomas couldn't meet his father's eyes. "It's more complicated than that, Dad." "Is it true?" Harold repeated, each word deliberate. Thomas nodded reluctantly. Harold took a deep breath, then did something that surprised me completely. He turned to Eleanor. "And you're pushing Rachel to forgive this? To pretend it didn't happen?" Eleanor blinked, caught off guard by her husband's reaction. "I'm trying. To save their marriage," she defended. "For the children's sake." "The children's sake," Harold repeated, shaking his head. He looked at me with new eyes. "Rachel, I had no idea. I'm so sorry." His simple acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes for the first time since this all began. "Harold," Eleanor began, but he cut her off. "No, Ellie, this isn't a rough patch. This is our son breaking his vows and betraying his family. And instead of holding him accountable, you're putting the burden on Rachel to forgive and forget?" Thomas stood up abruptly. "Dad, I know I messed up, but I'm trying to make it right." Harold regarded his son with a mixture of disappointment and sadness. Making it right starts with accepting the consequences of your actions, not expecting everyone to rearrange their lives to accommodate your mistakes. The kitchen fell silent. In all the years I'd known the Wilson family, I'd never seen this side of Harold. He'd always been the quiet one, the peacekeeper who went along with Eleanor's stronger personality. Eleanor recovered first. Harold, perhaps we should discuss this privately later. Why? He challenged. So you can convince me to help pressure Rachel? No, Ellie. If Thomas wants to repair the damage he's done, that's between him and Rachel. And if she decides she can't continue this marriage, that's her right. Eleanor's mouth fell open. But she's being hasty. She's not even willing to try. Counseling or... That's her choice, Harold interrupted firmly, and we will respect it. I sat there, stunned by this unexpected ally. For years, I'd viewed Harold as simply an extension of Eleanor's will, but suddenly I saw him clearly. A man of principle who had his own thoughts and values. Thomas looked between his parents, clearly not expecting this division. So you're taking her side? Harold shook his head. This isn't about sides, son. This is about right and wrong. And what you did was wrong. In that moment, something shifted in the room. The united front I'd been facing crumbled. Eleanor's certainty faltered. Thomas's hope for an easy reconciliation dimmed. And I felt, for the first time since that phone call 4 days ago, that I might not be alone in this fight after all. The drive home from Eleanor and Harold's house that Saturday afternoon was quiet. Lily and Jack sat in the back seat, worn out from playing, with their grandfather and the excitement of seeing Thomas. I kept glancing at them in the rearview mirror, wondering what was going through their young minds. Did they sense the tension? Did they understand why their father wasn't coming home with us? "Mommy," Lily finally said, her voice small, "is Daddy mad at us?" My heart clenched. "No, sweetheart. Daddy isn't mad at you or Jack. He loves you both very much." "Then why isn't he living with us anymore?" she persisted. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. Sometimes grown-ups need to sort out complicated feelings. It doesn't mean they don't love their children. "Is he sorting out complicated feelings with that lady from his office?" Jack asked innocently. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What lady, buddy?" "The one in the pictures on his phone. I saw her when he was showing me that game. She's pretty." A cold wave washed over me. Even my children had glimpsed evidence of Thomas's betrayal before I had. I wondered what else they had seen or heard that they hadn't told me. What subtle damage was already done. "We'll talk more about everything when we get home, okay?" I managed, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. By the time we pulled into our driveway, I had composed myself enough to get through dinner, bath time, and bedtime routines. After tucking the kids in, I sat alone at the kitchen table, Harold's unexpected support replaying in my mind. In all the years I'd known him, I'd never seen him stand against Eleanor so firmly. It made me wonder what other assumptions I'd been making, about my marriage, my in-laws, even myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Can we talk tomorrow?" "Just us. Please." I stared at the message for a long time before finally responding. "You can come by at 2. The kids will be at Megan's for a playdate." His reply was immediate. "Thank you, I'll be there." I set the phone down and opened my laptop. There was research to be done, preparations to make. If Thomas thought he was coming over to charm his way back into our life, he was about to be severely disappointed. By the time Thomas arrived the next afternoon, I had spent hours reading about divorce proceedings, speaking with a financial advisor, and making detailed lists of our assets. I had screenshots of his secret credit card statements, copies of text messages between him and Vanessa, and a folder containing photos of them together that I'd found in his email. The doorbell rang precisely at 2 p.m. I took a deep breath and opened it, coming face to face with a version of my husband I barely recognized. Thomas had always been meticulously put together. It was part of his charm, part of his success in the financial world. But the man standing on our porch looked like he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, his eyes bloodshot. "Rachel," he said, relief flooding his face. "Thank you for—" "Come in," I interrupted, stepping aside. I wouldn't be swayed by his disheveled appearance or whatever practiced speech he had prepared. He walked into our living room, glancing around as if seeing it for the first time. "The house looks nice." "It's the same as when you left 5 days ago," I pointed out, gesturing for him to sit while I remained standing. "Let's not waste time with small talk, Thomas. What did you want to discuss?" He sank onto the couch, hands clasped between his knees. "I want to come home, Rachel. I've made a terrible mistake, and I want to make it right." "Which mistake exactly?" I asked coolly. "The affair? The lies? The separate credit card? The apartment hunting behind my back?" He winced. "All of it. I lost myself, Rachel. I don't even recognize the person I became. That makes 2 of us." "I've ended things with Vanessa completely," he continued. "I told her I made the biggest mistake of my life and that my family means everything to me." "And how did she take that?" I couldn't help asking. His eyes dropped to the floor. "Not well. She's upset." "I can imagine," I said, remembering Vanessa's confidence on the phone. How certain she'd seemed that Thomas was planning to leave me. "She thought you were choosing her." "I never actually promised her that," he said quickly, then seemed to realize how that sounded. "I mean, I never intended to leave you and the kids. It was just complicated." "Complicated," I repeated. "You keep using that word, but from where I'm standing, it's actually quite simple. You betrayed everything we built together." "People make mistakes, Rachel," he said, echoing his mother's words from yesterday. "Terrible mistakes. But that doesn't mean they can't be forgiven, that marriages can't heal. Maybe some can," I acknowledged, "but I'm not sure ours should." His head snapped up. "What does that mean?" Instead of answering directly, I walked to the dining room table where I'd laid out my research and documentation. "Let's talk about what happens next, Thomas." He followed me, his expression shifting from hopeful to wary as he took in the papers spread across the table. "What is all this?" "Reality," I said simply. "I've spoken with a lawyer. I've reviewed our finances. I've documented your affair and the hidden credit card accounts. I'm preparing for divorce." The color drained from his face. "Divorce? Rachel, don't you think that's extreme? We haven't even tried counseling or—" "This isn't a heat-of-the-moment decision," I interrupted. "You didn't have a one-night stand, Thomas. You didn't make a single bad choice in a moment of weakness. You conducted a systematic double life for a 1.5 years while I trusted you completely." "I know," he said, his voice dropping, "and I will regret that for the rest of my life. But please, Rachel, don't throw away 11 years of marriage without at least trying to save it." "Why should I try to save something you were so willing to destroy?" The question came out sharper than I'd intended, but I didn't regret it. "Because despite my horrible mistakes, I love you," he said, reaching for my hand. I pulled it away. "I love our family, and I know you loved me once." "Love isn't enough," I said quietly. "Not anymore." "What about the kids?" he asked, changing tactics. "Think about how this will affect them." "I am thinking about them," I countered. "I'm thinking about what example I'm setting if I teach them that betrayal has no consequences, that they should accept being treated as an afterthought by the people who claim to love them." Thomas ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "So that's it? You've made up your mind already?" "I've made up my mind that I deserve better than what our marriage had become," I clarified. "Whether you're capable of offering that." I honestly don't know. A flicker of hope crossed his face. So, there's a chance? If I prove to you that I can change, that this will never happen again? I considered my words carefully. I'm not making any promises, Thomas. Right now, I need space and time. I need you to respect that. Of course, he said quickly. Whatever you need. What I need is for you to be honest, with me, with yourself, with your family. No more minimizing what happened, no more framing this as a rough patch or a misunderstanding. He nodded solemnly. I can do that. And I need you to take responsibility for telling your parents the full truth, I continued. Not the sanitized version you gave them initially. His expression faltered. My mom knows the basics. Your mom knows what you told her, which clearly wasn't everything. And Harold deserves to hear it directly from you, not pieced together from what I said yesterday. Dad seemed pretty upset, Thomas admitted. He was upset because what you did was upsetting, I pointed out. And because your mother was trying to pressure me into forgetting it ever happened. Thomas had the grace to look ashamed. I'll talk to them both, properly this time. Good. I crossed my arms. And we need to discuss practical matters, finances, living arrangements, time with the children. He nodded again, clearly relieved to be on more concrete ground. Whatever you think is fair. Fair would be you continuing to cover the mortgage and household expenses while we figure this out, I said firmly. And I want access to all financial accounts, no more secrets. Of course. He hesitated. And the kids? We'll work out a schedule. But Thomas, they're staying with me in the house. Their lives have been disrupted enough. He didn't argue, which surprised me. Perhaps Harold's reaction had affected him, more than I realized. Or perhaps he was simply saying whatever he thought I wanted to hear. Either way, by the time he left an hour later, we had hammered out a temporary arrangement for the next month, one that gave me breathing room to consider my next steps while providing stability for Lily and Jack. As I closed the door behind him, I felt a strange mixture of emotions, relief that the conversation was over, uncertainty about the future, and underneath it all, a growing sense of confidence in my own strength. 5 days ago, I might have crumbled under Thomas's apologies and promises. I might have convinced myself that forgiveness was the only option, that maintaining our family unit was worth any personal cost. But something had fundamentally changed. Perhaps it was seeing the evidence of his betrayal laid out so undeniably. Perhaps it was Eleanor's immediate instinct to prioritize her son's comfort over my pain. Or perhaps it was simply reaching the breaking point of how much disrespect I was willing to accept in the name of peace. Whatever the catalyst, I knew I wouldn't go back to being the woman who silenced her own needs to keep everyone else happy. That version of me was gone, and I wasn't mourning her loss. Monday morning arrived with a fresh wave of challenges. I had to call my boss at the marketing firm where I'd started working part-time when Jack entered preschool, explaining that I needed more hours if possible. I had to meet with our family attorney to formally begin divorce proceedings, even if I wasn't entirely certain that was the final outcome I wanted. And I had to prepare for the inevitable gossip that would spread once people realized Thomas and I were separated. But the most immediate challenge was the school drop-off, where I knew I'd face other parents who might have already heard rumors. I steeled myself as I walked Lily to her classroom, Jack's hand clutched tightly in mine. "Rachel!" a voice called as we approached the building. It was Diane Parker, the PTA president and neighborhood gossip hub. "I missed you at book club on Thursday." "I had a family situation," I said vaguely, trying to move past her. "Oh, I heard," she said, lowering her voice to a stage whisper. "Such a shame. But these things happen in marriages, don't they? The important thing is working through them." I froze, wondering exactly what she'd heard and from whom. "Excuse me?" She patted my arm in what I'm sure she thought was a sympathetic gesture. Marriage is a marathon, not a sprint. Thomas is such a good provider, and the children need their father. I'm sure you'll work it out. The implication was clear. I should forgive and forget for the sake of appearances and conventional family structure. Any other choice would be selfish, disruptive. Thank you for your concern, I said stiffly. But I prefer not to discuss my private life. Of course, she backpedaled, though her eyes gleamed with undisguised curiosity. I just wanted you to know you have support. We all go through challenges. I doubted Diane's husband had conducted an 18-month affair while she raised their children, but I held my tongue. Lily, say goodbye to Mrs. Parker. We need to get you to class. As we walked away, Lily looked up at me with worried eyes. Why was Mrs. Parker talking about Daddy? Children never missed anything. Some grown-ups like to talk about things that aren't their business, I explained. It's not very polite. Is Daddy coming home soon? She asked, changing subjects, with the lightning speed of a 7-year-old. I knelt down to her level, aware of curious glances from other parents. I don't know yet, sweetheart. Right now, Daddy and I both need some time to think about things. Grandma Eleanor says he should come home, Lily continued innocently. She called last night when you were in the shower. My blood ran cold. Grandma called you? Lily nodded. On the house phone. She said to tell Daddy we miss him and want him to come home. I took a deep breath, tamping down the surge of anger. Eleanor had crossed a line, trying to use my own child as a messenger in her campaign to reunite her son and his family. Lily, listen to me, I said gently but firmly. If Grandma calls again when I'm not there, please tell me right away, okay? And remember that grown-up problems are for grown-ups to solve. You don't need to worry about them. She looked uncertain, but nodded. I gave her a quick hug and sent her into her classroom, then headed to Jack's preschool drop-off with my mind racing. Eleanor's interference was something I should have anticipated but hadn't. If she was willing to manipulate my children, what else might she do? The answer came sooner than I expected. That afternoon, as I was picking Lily up from school, my phone rang with Eleanor's number. Hello, Eleanor, I answered, keeping my voice neutral despite my simmering anger about the call to Lily. Rachel, dear, she began with forced brightness. I was wondering if you and the children would join us for dinner tonight. Harold and I miss them terribly, and Thomas will be there. We thought it might be nice for the children to have a normal family meal. A normal family meal, as if Thomas and I were having a minor disagreement rather than navigating the aftermath of his long-term infidelity. I appreciate the invitation, I said carefully, but we already have plans for this evening. It wasn't entirely a lie. I had promised the kids pizza and a movie night. Oh. Eleanor sounded disappointed. Well, perhaps tomorrow then? Eleanor, I said, my patience wearing thin. I understand you want things to go back to normal, but that's not going to happen overnight. And I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't call and speak to Lily about these matters without my knowledge. A pause. I was just checking on my grandchildren, she defended. Surely I have that right. You have the right to be concerned about your grandchildren, I acknowledged. You don't have the right to use them as pawns to pressure me into reconciling with Thomas. That's not what I was doing, she insisted, though we both knew otherwise. I simply reminded Lily that family is important. Lily is 7 years old, I pointed out. She doesn't need the burden of adult problems placed on her shoulders. Eleanor sighed heavily. Rachel, I'm only trying to help. This situation is difficult for all of us. Yes, it is, I agreed. Which is why I need everyone to respect the boundaries I've set while I figure out what's best for me and my children. And what about what's best for Thomas? She asked, her voice hardening. Doesn't he deserve a chance to make amends? Thomas had 18 months of chances to make different choices, I said flatly. Now he can deal with the consequences of the ones he made. After another strained exchange, we ended the call with nothing resolved. Eleanor was clearly going to be a complication in whatever path forward I chose. Her loyalty to Thomas was unwavering, her vision of family unity paramount regardless of the circumstances. But as I sat with Lily and Jack that evening, watching them laugh at their favorite movie with tomato sauce smeared on their cheeks, I felt certain that I was making the right choices for them. They deserved a mother who modeled self-respect and healthy boundaries, not one who accepted betrayal for the sake of appearances. My resolve was tested again the next morning when I arrived at my part-time job at Meridian Marketing to find a massive bouquet of roses on my desk. My colleagues were already exchanging knowing smiles as I approached. "Looks like someone's in the doghouse," commented Greg from the neighboring cubicle, wiggling his eyebrows. I ignored him and checked the card attached to the flowers. "I'm sorry. Let me prove I can change. Love always, Thomas." A public display. A gesture designed to make me look heartless if I didn't respond with gratitude and forgiveness. I picked up the vase and walked directly to the break room, where I left it on the communal table with a note. "Free to a good home." When I returned to my desk, my boss, Jeanette, was waiting. "Rachel, do you have a minute?" I followed her to her office, bracing myself for questions about my personal life. Instead, she got straight to business. "I understand you're looking for more hours," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "As it happens, Marina is going on maternity leave next month, and we need someone to cover her client load. Are you interested?" The opportunity took me by surprise. Marina was a senior account manager whose clients included some of the agency's biggest accounts. "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. "I can handle it." Jeanette smiled. "I hoped you'd say that. You were quite the rising star before you stepped back for family reasons. It's time to get you back on track." As she outlined the responsibilities and the significant pay increase that would come with them, I felt a surge of confidence. This was exactly what I needed, not just financially, but emotionally. A reminder that I had value and abilities outside of my roles as wife and mother. "Thank you for this opportunity," I said sincerely as our meeting concluded. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Jeanette replied. Then, more gently, "And Rachel? Whatever's happening at home, you've got this. You're stronger than you realize." I blinked back unexpected tears at her simple vote of confidence. "Thank you." The day continued with its mix of challenges and small victories. Thomas texted to ask if I'd received his flowers. I didn't respond. Eleanor called again. I let it go to voicemail. The school called to say Jack wasn't feeling well. I left work early to pick him up, juggling the demands of single parenthood. By the time I got both kids to bed that night, I was exhausted, but strangely energized. Each decision I made on my own, each challenge I faced without Thomas, reinforced my growing certainty that I could do this, with or without him. That certainty was tested at 11 p.m. when my doorbell rang. I peered through the peephole to see Thomas swaying slightly on the porch, clearly intoxicated. "Rachel," he called through the door. "I know you're in there. Please talk to me." I contemplated ignoring him, but the last thing I needed was for him to wake the children. I cracked the door open but kept the chain on. "Thomas, go home. You're drunk." "I need to talk to you," he slurred. "You didn't answer about the flowers." "This isn't the time or place," I said firmly. "And showing up drunk at my door isn't going to convince me you've changed." "Your door?" he repeated, his tone shifting from pitiful to indignant. "This is my house, too. I pay the mortgage." "And we agreed you would stay away except for scheduled visits with the kids," I reminded him. "You need to leave, or I'm calling." "The police." His expression darkened. "You wouldn't." "Try me," I challenged, my hand already on my phone. We stared at each other through the crack in the door, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of fear. This wasn't the Thomas I knew. Charming, controlled, always mindful of appearances. This was someone unpredictable, someone who felt entitled to my attention regardless of my wishes. He must have seen the resolve in my face because he finally stepped back. Fine. But this conversation isn't over, Rachel. Yes, it is, I said quietly. For tonight, at least. I closed and locked the door, my hands trembling slightly. I hadn't expected Thomas to escalate like this. It revealed another side of him I hadn't seen before, or perhaps had chosen not to see. The next morning, my alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. I had decided to get up early to prepare for the day ahead, knowing it would be particularly challenging. I had a meeting with my lawyer at 10, a conference call with a new client at 1, and Lily's dance recital at 4. The schedule was tight but manageable if everything went according to plan. What I hadn't planned for was the email waiting in my inbox. From Thomas. Rachel, I'm sorry about last night. I was out of line. This separation is harder than I expected, and I'm not handling it well. But I want you to know that I'm committed to changing, to being the husband and father you and the kids deserve. I've scheduled an appointment with a therapist, and I'm looking into marriage counseling options. Please consider giving us, another chance. Love, Thomas. It was the kind of email that would have melted my heart a week ago. Now, I read it with a mixture of skepticism and caution. Was he genuinely remorseful, or was this another manipulation tactic? The therapist appointment was a step in the right direction, but it would take more than one email to rebuild the trust. He had shattered. I was still contemplating my response when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello, I answered cautiously. Is this Rachel Wilson? A woman's voice, professional and brisk. Yes, this is she. Rachel, my name is Claire Bennett. I'm the Human Resources Director at Oak Ridge Financial Advisors. My stomach dropped. Oak Ridge was where Thomas worked. I'm calling because we've received some concerning information about your husband, Thomas Wilson, and a potential inappropriate relationship with another employee. I closed my eyes, trying to process this new development. I see. Normally, we wouldn't involve spouses in HR matters, Claire continued, but given the circumstances and certain allegations that have been made, we wanted to verify some information. What kind of allegations? I asked, dreading the answer. There are claims that Mr. Wilson used company resources to conduct personal affairs, potentially misrepresented business expenses, and possibly engaged in favoritism regarding performance reviews and project assignments. In other words, Thomas had not only cheated on me, but had potentially jeopardized his career in the process. I wondered if Vanessa was behind these allegations, retaliating after being cast aside. I'm separated from my husband, I said carefully. I'm not sure how I can help with your investigation. I understand, Claire said. However, if you have any information that might be relevant to our inquiry, we would appreciate your cooperation. I hesitated, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to protect Thomas despite everything. He was still the father of my children, and his job security affected their financial well-being. But another part of me was tired of covering for him, of being complicit in his deceptions. Ms. Bennett, I finally said, I recently discovered that my husband has been having an affair with someone at your company. I believe her name is Vanessa Carter. A pause. Yes, Ms. Carter is an employee here. Another pause. May I ask when you became aware of this relationship? Less than a week ago, I admitted. Though apparently it had been going on for approximately 18 months. I see, Claire said, her tone shifting slightly. And to your knowledge, did Mr. Wilson ever use company events or business trips as cover for this relationship? The credit card statements flashed in my mind, charges at hotels during supposed conferences, dinners at expensive restaurants on nights he claimed to be working late. I believe he may have, I said quietly, but I don't have specific details. We talked for a few more minutes, with Claire asking pointed questions about timelines and potential misuse of company resources. By the end of the call, I felt drained, but strangely unburdened. The truth was finally coming to light in all areas of Thomas's life, not just our marriage. As I hung up, I realized I had reached a crucial decision point. I could continue trying to minimize the fallout from Thomas's choices, protecting him from the full consequences of his actions as I had often done throughout our marriage. Or I could step back and allow him to face those consequences directly, focusing instead on rebuilding my own life and protecting our children. The answer, when I framed it that way, was surprisingly clear. I was done being Thomas's shield, his safety net, his convenient excuse. I was done putting his needs above my own. I was done making myself smaller to accommodate his ego. I picked up my phone and finally responded to his email. Thomas, I'm glad you're seeking help. That's a positive step. But I need you to understand that I'm not making any decisions about our future right now. I need time and space to heal from the betrayal I've experienced and to figure out what's best for me and the children going forward. Please respect that. Rachel. It wasn't the reconciliation he hoped for, but it wasn't a final rejection either. It was the truth, messy, uncertain, and unavoidable. As I set my phone down, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For years, I had contorted myself to fit into the role of perfect wife, perfect daughter-in-law, perfect mother. Always accommodating, never demanding, putting everyone else's needs first. It had become so ingrained that I barely recognized the woman I'd become. But that was changing now. With each boundary I established, each decision I made for myself rather than to please others, I was reclaiming pieces of the woman I used to be. Strong, confident, unwilling to settle for less than I deserved. And it was that woman who would face whatever came next, whether it was rebuilding my marriage on entirely new terms or building a new life without Thomas. Either way, I wouldn't be going back to the way things were. I couldn't. That path had led me here to heartbreak and betrayal, to discovering how little I valued myself. It was time to forge a new path, one step at a time. Starting now. The news about Thomas's workplace investigation spread quickly. By the end of the week, I'd received 3 more calls from Eleanor, each more frantic than the last. I let them all go to voicemail, choosing instead to focus on the immediate challenges. In front of me, caring for my children, expanding my role at work, and maintaining my own sanity through the chaos. Friday afternoon, as I was leaving the office, my phone rang again. This time, it was Harold. Rachel, he said when I answered, his voice tired but kind. I hope I'm not interrupting. No, it's fine, I replied, surprised to hear from him directly. Is everything okay? A heavy sigh. Not particularly. Eleanor's beside herself about this investigation at Thomas's work. She's convinced you're somehow behind it. I stopped walking, temporarily speechless at the accusation. I'm sorry, what? I know, Harold said quickly. I told her it was ridiculous. But she's not thinking clearly right now. She's worried about Thomas losing his job. I didn't initiate the investigation, I clarified, though I wasn't sure why I felt the need to defend myself. HR called me because they were already looking into it. I figured as much, Harold said. But Eleanor's... Well, she's always been protective of Thomas. Beyond reason sometimes. The understatement almost made me laugh. Harold, I appreciate you calling, but I can't control what's happening at Thomas's workplace. That's between him and his employer. I understand that, he replied. I'm not calling to ask you to intervene. I just wanted to warn you that Eleanor might try to contact you again. Or worse, try to speak to the children about it. My grip tightened on the phone. She's already tried to use Lily once. I've made it clear that's unacceptable. I know, and I agree completely. I've told her the same, but… He trailed off, then continued with obvious reluctance. Rachel, the real reason I'm calling is to apologize. Apologize? I echoed, confused. For not seeing what was happening. For allowing Eleanor to pressure you all these years. For raising a son who could do something like this. His voice cracked slightly on the last words. I leaned against a nearby wall, unexpectedly moved by his admission. Harold, you don't need to apologize for Thomas's actions. He's an adult who made his own choices. Perhaps, he conceded. But I wonder if the way we raised him, the way Eleanor especially always shielded him from consequences, contributed to the man he became. It was an insight I hadn't expected from Harold, who had always seemed to go along with Eleanor's management of family dynamics. That's remarkably self-aware, I said carefully. A short laugh. I'm old, Rachel, not oblivious. I've had a lot of time to think this past week. About Thomas, about my own marriage, about the way we've treated you over the years. My throat tightened. And what conclusions have you reached? That we, especially Eleanor, have expected you to accommodate us rather than the other way around. That we've taken your flexibility and patience for granted. That we've been far more indulgent with Thomas than was good for anyone, including him. Hearing Harold articulate the dynamics I'd felt but never named left me momentarily speechless. Anyway, he continued into my silence, I just wanted you to know that whatever you decide about your marriage, I respect your choices. And I'd like to remain part of my grandchildren's lives if you'll allow it. Of course, Harold, I said quickly. You've always been good to Lily and Jack. That hasn't changed. Thank you, he said, obvious relief in his voice. Would it be all right if I picked them up from school one day next week? Maybe took them for ice cream? Just me, not Eleanor. The request surprised me. Harold had never arranged activities with the children independently before. That would be fine, I said. They'd love that. We made arrangements for Tuesday afternoon, and as I hung up, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Harold's support was unexpected but welcome. His insights into the family dynamics validated feelings I'd struggled to articulate, and his desire to maintain his relationship with my children separate from the drama of my marriage showed a depth I hadn't given him credit for. That evening, as I was making dinner, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and went to answer it, expecting perhaps Megan dropping off Lily's jacket she'd left at their playdate. Instead, I found Vanessa Carter standing on my porch. The shock must have shown on my face because she immediately raised her hands in a placating gesture. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just think we should talk. I studied her for a moment. She was beautiful, of course, tall and polished, in a way that made me acutely aware of my messy ponytail and flour-smudged t-shirt. But she also looked tired, her confident facade from our phone call noticeably frayed around the edges. The children are home, I said finally. She nodded. Another time then? Or maybe we could meet somewhere else? Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face. What could we possibly have to talk about that would benefit me? But curiosity won out. There's a coffee shop on Maple Street. I could meet you there tomorrow at 9. Thank you, she said, looking genuinely relieved. I'll be there. After she left, I returned to the kitchen, my mind racing. What did Vanessa want? Was she going to apologize? Demand I let Thomas go? Warn me about something I didn't yet know? Who was that, Mommy? Lily asked, coming into the kitchen. Just someone I need to meet with tomorrow, I said, forcing a smile. How's your homework coming along? The next morning, after dropping the kids with Megan for a few hours, I arrived at Maple Street Coffee 5 minutes early. Vanessa was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. "I got you a latte," she said as I approached. "Thomas always said you preferred them to regular coffee." It was such a strangely intimate detail for her to know about me. I sat down without touching the drink. "Why did you want to meet?" Vanessa shifted in her seat, suddenly less composed than she'd appeared on my doorstep. "I wanted to clear the air, and to apologize for how I approached you on the phone. That was not my finest moment." "Calling your married lover's wife is rarely going to be anyone's finest moment," I observed dryly. She winced. "Fair enough. Look, I know you have no reason to believe anything I say, but I thought you should know the full story. Not just Thomas's version of events." I crossed my arms. "I'm listening." "Thomas and I met at a company retreat," she began. "He was charming. Attentive. You know how he can be. He told me right away that he was married, but that things had been difficult for a long time. That you were essentially living separate lives under the same roof." My stomach clenched at the familiar narrative. The classic justification of cheating men everywhere. "And you believed him?" "Not entirely," she admitted, "but enough to let him buy me drinks, to accept his invitation to dinner the following week. I told myself I wasn't looking for anything serious, just some attention, some fun. At the expense of someone else's marriage," I couldn't help adding. Vanessa didn't flinch from the accusation. "Yes, I'm not proud of that part. But it's easy to minimize the existence of someone you've never met. Someone who's just an abstract concept." I thought about that. How Thomas had effectively erased me from his narrative, reduced me to a convenient excuse for his behavior. "So, what changed? Why call me now?" She took a sip of her coffee. "About 6 months ago, things got more serious between us. Thomas started talking about leaving you, about us building a life together. He even took me to look at apartments. But there was always some reason to delay. The kids needed time to adjust. His mother was having health issues. It wasn't the right financial moment. The timeline aligned with Eleanor's breast cancer scare last winter. A false alarm, thankfully. But it had been a tense few weeks of tests and waiting. 3 weeks ago," Vanessa continued, "he promised me he'd tell you after his parents' anniversary dinner, that by Thanksgiving we'd be together officially." She laughed humorlessly. "I actually believed him. Started making plans, telling friends it was finally happening." "And then?" I prompted when she fell silent. "And then nothing changed. More excuses, more delays. I realized he had no intention of leaving you. He just wanted to keep us both. Indefinitely." She met my eyes directly. "So I called you. Not my proudest moment, but I was angry and hurt." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because you deserve to know what kind of man you're married to, and because—" She hesitated, then continued more carefully. "I've been contacted by HR. They're investigating Thomas for misuse of company funds, among other things. So Thomas's workplace troubles weren't Vanessa's revenge after all. What does that have to do with me?" "Nothing directly," she said. "But they've asked me about business trips we took together. Expenses he claimed for dinners and hotels. I've been honest with them, which means I've had to admit to the affair." I nodded slowly, processing this. "And now you're worried about your own job." "Yes," she admitted. "But I'm also genuinely sorry for the pain I've caused you. You seem like a decent person who got caught in Thomas's web of lies, just like I did." I almost laughed at the comparison. The difference being that I was his wife, and you knew that from the beginning. She had the grace to look ashamed. "You're right. I'm not trying to equate our situations. I thought you should hear the truth from me directly." "And what is the truth, Vanessa? Beyond the timeline of your relationship?" She met my gaze steadily. "The truth is that Thomas is a manipulator who tells everyone what they want to hear. He told me you were distant and cold. He told me you prioritized the children over him. He told me you wouldn't care if he left because you'd already checked out emotionally years ago. Each word was like a small dagger. Not because I believed Thomas's characterization of me, but because I recognized how effectively he'd crafted a narrative that absolved him of responsibility. "And the truth about you?" I pressed. "Are you still in love with him?" Vanessa's expression hardened. "No. Whatever I felt for Thomas died the moment I realized he'd been lying to both of us all along. He doesn't love either of us. He loves the way we make him feel about himself." It was a devastating assessment, but one that resonated with uncomfortable clarity. How much of our marriage had been about maintaining Thomas's ego, his self-image, as the perfect husband and father, while I did the actual work of building our family? "For what it's worth," Vanessa added quietly, "I am truly sorry, not just for the affair, but for not being brave enough to walk away when I first realized who he really was." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. Finding none, I finally reached for the latte she'd bought me. "Thank you for your honesty. It can't have been easy to come here." "No," she agreed. "But it felt necessary, for both of us." We finished our coffee in a strange, almost companionable silence. Two women united by the common experience of Thomas's betrayal, each processing what it meant for our futures. As we stood to leave, Vanessa hesitated. "There's one more thing you should know. Thomas's mother called me yesterday." I froze. "Eleanor called you?" Vanessa nodded, looking uncomfortable. "She asked to meet for lunch, said she wanted to understand the situation better and see if there was a way to resolve things amicably for everyone involved." The audacity was breathtaking. While claiming to support my marriage, Eleanor was reaching out to her son's mistress. For what? To assess Vanessa as a potential daughter-in-law? To pressure her into ending things with Thomas so he could return to his family? To gather intelligence she could use against me? "What did you tell her?" I asked. "That I had nothing to discuss with her," Vanessa replied. "That her son had created this mess, and it wasn't my job to help clean it up." I couldn't help the short laugh that escaped me. I bet that went over well. "About as well as you'd expect," Vanessa said with a wry smile. She suggested I lacked maturity and didn't understand the importance of family. The familiar refrain, Eleanor's go-to criticism for anyone who didn't bend to her will. "Well, thank you for telling me, and for refusing to meet with her." Vanessa shrugged. "Like I said, I'm done being manipulated by the Wilson family." We parted ways in the parking lot with no promises of future contact, but a strange sense of closure nonetheless. As I drove to pick up the children from Megan's, I felt oddly lighter, as if hearing Vanessa's perspective had freed me from some lingering doubts about my own role in the dissolution of my marriage. Those feelings of clarity sustained me until Sunday morning when I woke to discover Thomas had taken the children. I'd fallen asleep on the couch watching a movie, exhausted after a full day of Lily's soccer game, Jack's play date, and household chores. When I woke at 7 a.m. with a stiff neck and confusion about why the house was so quiet, I checked the children's rooms to find their beds empty. Panic seized me until I spotted the note on the kitchen counter. Took the kids for breakfast with Mom and Dad. They were awake early and excited to see their grandparents. We'll have them back by noon. Tea. The relief of knowing they were safe quickly gave way to anger. Thomas and I had a clear agreement about his time with the children. He was supposed to give me advance notice, not simply take them while I was asleep. And involving his parents without discussing it with me first was a direct violation of the boundaries I'd established. I grabbed my phone and called him, trembling with rage. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again with the same result, then texted, "Bring the children home immediately. You had no right to take them without my knowledge or consent." 10 minutes passed with no response. I paced the kitchen, debating my next move. Should I drive to Eleanor and Harold's house, call the police, wait and see if Thomas honored his promise to return them by noon? I was still deliberating when my phone rang, not Thomas, but Harold. "Rachel?" he said as soon as I answered, his voice tinged with regret. "I want you to know I had no part in this. Thomas showed up with the kids this morning saying you'd agreed to a family breakfast." My grip on the phone tightened. "That's not true. I was asleep when he took them." A heavy sigh. "I feared as much. Eleanor's been pushing him to assert his parental rights, telling him he doesn't need your permission to see his own children." "That's not how this works," I said through clenched teeth. "We have an agreement. And legally, he can't just take them without my knowledge." "I know," Harold said, his voice lowered as if he didn't want to be overheard. "That's why I'm calling. They're planning to keep the children until dinner. Eleanor's talking about taking them shopping for new clothes, making a day of it." My blood ran cold. "Harold, I need you to be very clear with them. If the children aren't home by noon, as Thomas promised in his note, I will be calling the police to report a parental kidnapping." "Rachel, please," Harold pleaded. "That would devastate the children. Let me talk to them, convince them to bring the kids home." I closed my eyes, trying to master my emotions. Harold was right. Involving the police would traumatize Lily and Jack. But I also couldn't allow Thomas and Eleanor to establish a precedent of taking my children without permission. "You have 1 hour," I said finally. "If they're not on their way home by then, I'm calling the police." "I understand," Harold said solemnly. "I'll do everything I can." 45 minutes later, my doorbell rang. I rushed to answer it, finding Harold standing there with Lily and Jack, both clutching new stuffed animals. "Mommy!" Jack exclaimed, throwing his arms around my legs. "Grandma got me a dinosaur!" I hugged him tightly. Then Lily, relief washing over me. "That was very nice of her. Why don't you two go play in the living room for a bit? I need to talk to Grandpa." Once they were out of earshot, I turned to Harold. "Thank you for bringing them home." He grimaced. "I wish I could say it was easy. Eleanor's furious and Thomas isn't much better. They're convinced you're being unreasonable, that you're using the children to punish Thomas." "I'm following the agreement Thomas and I made," I pointed out. "He's the one who violated it." "I know," Harold sighed. "But they're not thinking rationally right now. Eleanor especially is convinced that if Thomas just pushes hard enough, you'll give in and take him back." The insight into their thinking wasn't surprising, but it was concerning. "Is that why she reached out to Vanessa? Part of some grand reconciliation plan?" Harold's eyes widened. "She did what?" "Vanessa told me Eleanor called her, asked to meet for lunch." Harold closed his eyes briefly, looking pained. "I had no idea. Rachel, I'm so sorry. This situation seems to be bringing out the worst in my wife." "Or perhaps just revealing who she's always been," I suggested quietly. He didn't argue the point. "Either way, I want you to know I don't condone what happened today, or what's been happening generally." "I appreciate that," I said honestly. "But Harold, I need more than your private support. I need you to actively stand against this kind of behavior. The children can't become pawns in whatever game Thomas and Eleanor are playing." He nodded slowly. "You're right. I've spent too many years keeping the peace at the expense of doing what's right. That changes now." Something in his tone made me believe him. "Thank you. One more thing," he said, glancing toward the living room to ensure the children were still occupied. "Thomas has been suspended from work pending the investigation. Eleanor's beside herself, convinced it will ruin his career." I absorbed this information, wondering if it would make Thomas more desperate, more willing to follow Eleanor's manipulative tactics. "That's unfortunate, but it's the consequence of his choices." "Indeed," Harold agreed. "Though Eleanor sees it differently. She's determined to save Thomas from what she sees as an unfair persecution. He hesitated. She's even talking about reaching out to your parents. My parents lived in Arizona and had always maintained a cordial but distant relationship with Thomas's family. What could she possibly hope to achieve by involving them? I think she believes they might persuade you to take a more forgiving approach, Harold explained, looking embarrassed. She keeps saying that they raised you with traditional values and would understand the importance of preserving family unity. The presumption was so breathtaking I almost laughed. My parents raised me to value self-respect and honesty above all else. If she's expecting them to pressure me into reconciling with a cheating husband, she's going to be deeply disappointed. I tried to tell her as much, Harold said, but she's not hearing reason right now. After Harold left, I spent the rest of the morning with Lily and Jack, carefully asking questions about their morning with their grandparents. Had Grandma said anything about Mommy and Daddy? Had Daddy seemed sad or angry? Their answers were typically childlike, more focused on the pancakes they'd eaten and the toys they'd received than any undercurrents of adult tension. But Lily, perceptive as always, eventually asked, "Why did Daddy take us without telling you? You seemed upset when Grandpa brought us home." I knelt to her level, choosing my words carefully. "Daddy should have talked to me first before taking you this morning. We have rules about that so everyone knows what's happening and no one worries." "Grandma said you were being mean to Daddy," Lily continued, her brow furrowed. "She said you won't let him come home even though he's sorry." The familiar anger flared again at Eleanor's manipulation. "Grandma shouldn't have said that to you, sweetheart. What's happening between me and Daddy is complicated grown-up stuff that you don't need to worry about." "But when is Daddy coming home?" she persisted. "I miss him." "I know you do," I said gently. "And Daddy misses you too. That's why he gets to spend time with you and Jack. But right now, Daddy and I need to be apart while we figure things out." "Because he has a girlfriend?" Lily asked innocently. I froze. "Where did you hear that?" "Jack heard Grandma and Daddy talking," she explained. "Grandma was mad because Daddy's girlfriend got him in trouble at work." I closed my eyes briefly, gathering my composure. Yes, Daddy had a girlfriend when he should have just been married to Mommy. That's one of the reasons we're not living together right now. Lily considered this. "That's not very nice." "No," I agreed. "It wasn't." "Is that why you're sad sometimes?" she asked, reaching out to touch my face with small fingers. The simple gesture nearly undid me. "Sometimes, yes. But I'm also very happy to have you and Jack. You two make me happier than anything in the world." She nodded solemnly. "We love you too, Mommy. And we don't need Daddy's girlfriend. We just need you." I pulled her into a tight hug, my heart simultaneously breaking and healing at my daughter's innocent wisdom. That evening, after the children were in bed, I received a text from Thomas. "We need to talk about what happened today. I had every right to take my children to see their grandparents." I stared at the message, noting the complete lack of apology for violating our agreement or recognition of how his actions had affected me. It was all about his rights, his needs, his perspective. Before I could formulate a response, another text came through. "Mom's really upset about how you're handling this. She says you're turning the kids against me." The irony was almost laughable. I typed back, "Your mother has been actively trying to manipulate our children, telling them I'm being mean to you and discussing your girlfriend and workplace problems in front of them. If anyone is damaging your relationship with Lily and Jack, it's you and Eleanor." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared as Thomas composed his reply. "Mom's just trying to help. She loves the kids and wants what's best for all of us. What's best for our children is adults who respect boundaries and don't use them as pawns in their own agenda," I responded. "If you want to maintain a healthy relationship with Lily and Jack, You need to start by honoring our agreements about visitation. A longer pause this time. Finally, I miss them, and I miss you. Can't we at least try to work this out? For the kids? I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted by the emotional manipulation. Thomas, you didn't miss us during the 18 months you were with Vanessa. You don't get to play the victim now that you're facing consequences. That's not fair, he protested. I made a terrible mistake, but I've always loved you and the kids. Love without respect and honesty isn't love, I replied. It's possession. So that's it? He texted back. You're not even willing to try? 11 years of marriage just thrown away? I didn't throw it away, I reminded him. You did, and right now, I need space to decide what's best for me and the children going forward. If you actually respect me at all, you'll give me that. He didn't respond for several minutes. When he did, it was with a single word. Fine. I set my phone down, knowing this wasn't the end of the conversation, or the conflict. Thomas had always been stubborn, and with Eleanor encouraging his sense of entitlement, he was unlikely to simply accept my boundaries. My instincts proved correct the very next afternoon when I received a call from Megan while at work. Rachel, you need to get to the school right away. Thomas is there trying to pick up the kids, and the office staff isn't sure what to do. My blood ran cold. I'm on my way. I arrived at Oak Ridge Elementary 15 minutes later to find Thomas in a heated discussion with Mrs. Patel, the school secretary. He turned when I entered, his expression a mixture of defiance and embarrassment. What's going on? I demanded. Mrs. Patel looked relieved to see me. Mr. Wilson says he has a right to pick up the children, but you're the only one authorized on their pickup list. I was explaining that we need your permission. I'm their father, Thomas interrupted. I don't need permission to pick up my own children. Actually, you do, I said firmly, especially after yesterday's stunt. His jaw tightened. It wasn't a stunt. I took my kids to see their grandparents. Without my knowledge or consent, while I was asleep, I reminded him. And now you're trying to take them from school without telling me? I thought we could have dinner together, he said, his tone softening, adopting the reasonable voice he used when trying to manage a situation. Spend some quality time. The kids miss me. Then you should have called me, followed our agreement. About visitation, I pointed out. Not shown up at their school trying to circumvent me entirely. Mrs. Patel cleared her throat awkwardly. Perhaps you two should continue this discussion privately. I can have the children wait in the library until you've resolved things. I turned to her gratefully. Thank you, Mrs. Patel. Could you let their teachers know I'll pick them up in about 15 minutes? She nodded and retreated to her office, leaving Thomas and me alone in the small reception area. This is ridiculous, he hissed as soon as she was gone. You're treating me like a stranger, not the father of your children. You're acting like one, I shot back. Responsible co-parents communicate, Thomas. They don't sneak around behind each other's backs. I wasn't sneaking, he protested. I just wanted to see my children. Then follow the process we agreed to, I said firmly. Text or call me, arrange a time, stick to it. It's not complicated. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. This is Mom's fault, isn't it? She pushed me to take the kids yesterday, and now you're punishing me for it. The deflection of responsibility was so typically Thomas that I almost laughed. I'm not punishing you. I'm establishing boundaries after you violated my trust. Again. Something in my tone must have reached him because his defensive posture softened slightly. I'm sorry about yesterday, he conceded. I should have waited until you were awake, talked to you first. It was the first genuine apology he'd offered since this whole ordeal began. Yes, you should have. But Rachel, he continued, you have to understand how hard this is for me. Being away from the kids, from you, facing everyone's judgment at work, in the neighborhood. Even Dad seems disappointed in me. For a moment, I almost felt sympathy for him. Then I remembered the 18 months of lies, the secret credit cards, the apartment hunting with Vanessa. Actions have consequences, Thomas. You're finally experiencing them. He looked at me with those familiar blue eyes, now clouded with a mixture of remorse and self-pity. So what now? You're just going to keep using the children as leverage until I… What? Grovel enough? Pay enough penance? This isn't about punishment, Thomas, I said, keeping my voice low despite my rising frustration. It's about trust. It's about demonstrating through actions, not just words, that you respect me as their mother and as a person. I do respect you, he insisted. Then act like it, I challenged. Honor our agreements. Stop letting your mother interfere in our parenting decisions. Take responsibility for your choices instead of blaming everyone else for your problems. His expression hardened. You've changed, Rachel. You never used to talk to me like this. You're right, I acknowledged. I've spent years swallowing my feelings, compromising my needs, making myself smaller to accommodate your ego and your mother's expectations. That woman is gone. A mix of emotions crossed his face: confusion, anger, and something that looked almost like fear. Thomas had always known exactly how to handle me, how to smooth over conflicts with charm and carefully chosen words. But those tactics weren't working anymore, and he seemed genuinely unsettled by the change. I'd like to see the children today, he said finally, shifting to a more practical tone. Since I'm already here. I considered the request. Denying him would only escalate the situation and potentially upset Lily and Jack. You can take them for dinner, I decided. Have them home by 7:30 for bedtime. Relief flooded his face. Thank you. But Thomas, I added firmly, if you ever try to pick them up without my knowledge again, I will modify our informal arrangement into a formal legal custody agreement with very specific terms. Do you understand? He nodded slowly, recognition dawning that I wasn't making an idle threat. I understand. As I walked to the library to collect the children, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and strength. Each confrontation with Thomas or Eleanor drained me emotionally, yet each time I held my ground, I felt more certain of my own resilience. The children were delighted to see their father, of course. They ran to him with open arms, their faces lighting up with uncomplicated joy. Whatever my feelings about Thomas, I couldn't deny that he loved Lily and Jack. And they loved him. Daddy's taking you for dinner, I explained as they gathered their backpacks. You'll be home in time for your normal bedtime. Are you coming? Too, Mommy? Jack asked, his small hand slipping into mine. I shook my head. Not this time, buddy. This is special time just for you and Daddy. Thomas shot me a grateful look over the children's heads. We're going to have a great time, he promised them. Maybe get pizza? As they walked to the parking lot, Lily turned back to wave at me, her expression a mix of excitement and uncertainty. I waved back, hoping that despite the tension between their parents, my children would emerge from this crisis secure in the knowledge that they were loved unconditionally. I used the unexpected free time to meet with my lawyer, updating her on recent developments and discussing potential next steps if Thomas's behavior continued to escalate. Based on what you've described, we have grounds for a temporary custody order that sets very specific parameters, Ms. Patel explained. But I'd recommend trying mediation first. It's less adversarial and might help establish clearer boundaries without burning bridges completely. And if mediation doesn't work? I asked. Then we proceed with a formal custody filing, she replied. But Rachel, I want to make sure you're thinking long-term. These children will connect you and Thomas for the rest of your lives, regardless of your marital status. I nodded, understanding her point. I don't want to damage their relationship with their father. I just need Thomas to respect my role as their mother and stop trying to undermine me. That's a reasonable position, Ms. Patel assured me. Just keep documenting everything. The incident at the school today, yesterday's unauthorized visit, any communication from Eleanor that involves the children. It will help establish a pattern if we do need to take more formal action. By the time I left her office, I felt more prepared for whatever might come next. Thomas returned the children precisely at 7:30, another small indication that perhaps my firm boundaries were having an impact. They had a great time, he told me on the doorstep, keeping his voice low as the children ran inside to get ready for bed. Jack ate an entire personal pizza by himself. I smiled despite myself. He's been doing that lately. Hollow leg, I think. A moment of normalcy stretched between us, a reminder of the easy companionship we'd once shared as parents. But it was fleeting, replaced quickly by the awkward reality of our current situation. Rachel, Thomas began hesitantly, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about taking responsibility, about respecting boundaries. He paused. I've scheduled more sessions with the therapist. I'm really trying to understand how I got here, how I could have betrayed you so completely. I studied his face, looking for signs of the old Thomas, the one who said whatever he thought people wanted to hear. But his expression seemed genuinely reflective, his eyes meeting mine without the defensive anger of our earlier conversation. That's a positive step, I acknowledged carefully. I know it doesn't change what I did, he continued, and I know I can't expect forgiveness just because I'm seeing a therapist, but I want you to know I'm not giving up on us, on our family. I sighed. Thomas, I appreciate that you're getting help, but right now I need to focus on healing myself and providing stability for the children. I can't make any promises about our future. He nodded, accepting this boundary in a way he hadn't before. I understand. Just don't close the door completely, please. Before I could respond, Lily called from inside. Mommy, Jack put toothpaste in his hair. Thomas smiled ruefully. Duty calls. Good night, Rachel. As he walked back to his car, I felt a flicker of something unexpected. Not forgiveness, certainly, but perhaps the first fragile seedling of hope that Thomas might actually be capable of genuine change. That seedling was promptly trampled the next morning when I received a text from Eleanor. We need to talk about your treatment of Thomas. The River's Edge, 1 p.m., just you and me. The presumption of the message, not asking if I was available, not acknowledging any wrongdoing, simply summoning me like a misbehaving child, made my blood boil. My first instinct was to ignore it completely, but something made me reconsider. Perhaps it was time for a direct confrontation with Eleanor to lay everything on the table once and for all. I texted back, I'll be there. The River's Edge was an upscale restaurant overlooking the lake, the kind of place Eleanor favored for its exclusivity and the deference shown to regular patrons like herself. I arrived precisely at 1 p.m. to find her already seated at her usual table, a glass of white wine in front of her. Rachel, she greeted me with a tight smile. Thank you for coming. I sat down across from her, declining the waiter's offer of wine. You said we needed to talk. Eleanor took a deliberate sip of her wine before responding. Yes, about Thomas, about this entire situation. You mean about your son's affair and the aftermath? I clarified, refusing to adopt her evasive language. Her mouth tightened at my directness. That's one way to put it. Though I think we both know marriages are more complicated than that. Do we? I challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, it's pretty straightforward. Thomas made a series of deliberate choices to betray his family. Now he's facing the consequences of those choices. Eleanor set down her glass with a controlled precision that betrayed her irritation. Rachel, I understand you're hurt. That's natural. But Thomas has apologized. He's admitted his mistake and is trying to make amends. At some point, continuing to punish him becomes vindictive. The familiar framing, my boundary setting as punishment, my pain as something to be quickly processed and set aside for others' comfort, was so predictable it almost made me laugh. "This isn't about punishment," I said evenly. "It's about trust. It's about respect. It's about the example I set for my children about what kind of treatment they should accept from people who claim to love them." "And what about the example of forgiveness?" Eleanor countered. "Of commitment through difficult times? Of family unity?" "Forgiveness doesn't mean erasing consequences," I pointed out. "And commitment goes both ways. Thomas broke his commitment to our family long before I asked him to leave." The waiter approached again, looking uncomfortable at the obvious tension. Eleanor ordered a salad without looking at the menu. I asked for an iced tea, not intending to stay long enough for a meal. Once he departed, Eleanor leaned forward, her voice lowering. "Rachel, I've been patient. I've given you time to work through your feelings. But this has gone on long enough. Thomas is miserable. The children are confused. Our family is fractured." "And whose fault is that?" I asked quietly. "It doesn't matter whose fault it is," she exclaimed, her composure slipping slightly. "What matters is fixing it." "It absolutely matters whose fault it is," I disagreed. "Because fixing it doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It means building something new based on honesty and mutual respect, things that have been missing from my marriage for a very long time." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that Thomas's affair wasn't the cause of our problems. It was a symptom of a relationship dynamic that prioritized his needs and feelings over mine. A dynamic you helped create and maintain." She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. "How dare you blame me for Thomas's mistakes?" "I'm not blaming you for the affair," I clarified. "Thomas made those choices himself. But I am holding you accountable for your role in shaping the man he became, someone who felt entitled to take what he wanted regardless of the cost to others." A flush crept up Eleanor's neck, her perfectly manicured hand tightening around the stem of her wine glass. "You're being ridiculous. I raised Thomas to be a good man, a family man." "You raised him to believe his needs and feelings always came first," I corrected. "You taught him that women exist to accommodate him, to manage his emotions, to make allowances for his behavior. Is it any wonder he thought he deserved both a devoted wife at home and an exciting girlfriend on the side?" Eleanor's mouth opened and closed, genuine shock registering on her face. In all the years I'd known her, I had never spoken to her this directly. I had always couched my disagreements in careful, deferential language, always concerned with maintaining peace even at my own expense. "This isn't about Thomas at all, is it?" she finally managed. "This is about your resentment toward me." "This is about patterns," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Patterns that have shaped our family dynamic for years. Patterns I'm no longer willing to perpetuate." The waiter returned with my iced tea and Eleanor's salad. She didn't touch her food, her gaze fixed on me with a new intensity. "So, what exactly do you want?" she asked when we were alone again. "A divorce? Half of everything Thomas has worked for? To turn the children against their father?" "What I want," I said carefully, "is respect. From Thomas, from you, from everyone who is part of my children's lives. I want acknowledgement that my feelings matter, that my boundaries are valid, that my role as their mother isn't subordinate to anyone else's desires." "And if you don't get that?" Eleanor challenged. "Then I'll continue to protect myself and my children however I need to," I said simply, "even if that means limiting certain people's access to our lives." The threat hung in the air between us, unmistakable. Eleanor's expression darkened. "You would keep my grandchildren from me over this?" "I haven't kept them from you," I pointed out. "What I've done is insist on basic respect and appropriate boundaries. Your access to Lily and Jack depends entirely on your willingness to honor those boundaries. Eleanor's jaw tightened. I see. So this is blackmail. This is parenting, I corrected. This is me doing what all good mothers do, protecting my children from harmful influences and teaching them what healthy relationships look like. Harmful influences, she repeated, her voice rising. I have loved those children from the moment they were born. I have given them everything. Except respect for their mother, I interrupted. Except modeling healthy relationships and boundaries. Except teaching them that love doesn't demand control. Eleanor set down her fork with a clatter. You know, when Thomas first told us about the separation, I defended you. I said you were just hurt, that you would come around once the initial shock passed. But now I see Harold was right about you all along. I blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected reference to her husband. What do you mean? Harold said, years ago that you were stronger than anyone gave you credit for, that underneath all that accommodation and peacemaking was a will of iron. Her lips curled into something between a grimace and a grudging smile. I told him he was imagining things, that you were just a sweet, slightly insecure girl who needed guidance. I see now I was wrong. The assessment was so unexpected, so strangely perceptive, that for a moment I wasn't sure how to respond. Harold said that about me? Eleanor nodded, studying me with new eyes. He's always been rather fascinated by you, actually. Says you remind him of his mother, quiet on the surface but immovable when it matters. I had never met Harold's mother, who died before Thomas and I began dating, but I had heard stories of a gentle but formidable woman who raised 6 children largely on her own after being widowed young. I'll take that as a compliment, I said finally. He meant it as one, Eleanor acknowledged. She took another sip of wine, her expression thoughtful. You're not at all what I expected when Thomas first brought you home. I thought he'd chosen someone pliable. Someone who would fit seamlessly into our family without disrupting the dynamic. And I did, for a long time, I pointed out. I tried so hard to be what you wanted, what Thomas needed, but I lost myself in the process. Something flickered across Eleanor's face, recognition, perhaps, or a distant memory. I know something about that, she said quietly. Before I could ask what she meant, her phone chimed with a text. She glanced at it, her expression immediately shifting from contemplative to alarmed. It's Thomas, she said, setting the phone down with trembling fingers. Vanessa Carter came to his apartment last night. She's pregnant. The world seemed to tilt sideways for a moment, the restaurant's ambient noise fading to a distant hum. As I processed this new information, pregnant, Thomas's girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, was carrying his child. Are they sure it's his? I asked, the question emerging before I could filter it. Eleanor's eyes flashed with indignation. That woman claims she hasn't been with anyone else, and the timing. It would have been during their relationship. Another child, a half-sibling for Lily and Jack, a permanent, irrevocable connection between Thomas, Vanessa, and by extension, me and my children. The implications were staggering. What does Thomas plan to do? I managed to ask. He's in shock, Eleanor replied. He only found out this morning when she came to his workplace. Apparently, she didn't intend to tell him at all. Was planning to handle it on her own. One of his colleagues convinced her he had a right to know. I thought about Vanessa's words during our coffee shop conversation. Her assertion that she was done being manipulated by the Wilson family, that she wanted nothing more to do with Thomas. Learning she was pregnant must have been devastating. For her, upending whatever plans she had made to move forward with her life. Has he spoken to her directly? Beyond the initial confrontation? Eleanor shook her head. She left after telling him, said she wasn't asking for anything, just thought he should know. She leaned forward, voice dropping. Rachel, this changes everything. If that woman has Thomas's child, if Vanessa has Thomas's child, I corrected firmly, then that child will be Lily and Jack's half-sibling. A connection that deserves respect regardless of the circumstances of conception. Eleanor looked taken aback by my response. She had clearly expected shock, anger, perhaps even a vindictive satisfaction at this complication in Thomas's life. Not the calm, measured acceptance I was demonstrating. You can't possibly be okay with this, she said incredulously. I'm not okay with any of it, I clarified. But my feelings don't change the reality. If Vanessa is pregnant with Thomas's child, that's now part of our family story, like it or not. Eleanor stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. You really have changed. Yes, I agreed simply. I have. The rest of our lunch passed in a strange, strained silence. Eleanor picked at her salad while I sipped my tea, both of us processing the implications of this new development. When the bill came, she reached for it automatically. I've got it, I said, placing my credit card on the tray before she could. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. Her eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't argue. As we walked to the parking lot together, she paused before we reached our cars. What will you do now? She asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. About Thomas. About everything. I considered the question carefully. I don't know yet, but whatever I decide, it will be based on what's best for me and my children, not what's most comfortable for everyone else. Eleanor nodded slowly. I suppose that's fair. She hesitated, then added with unexpected candor. I've never been very good at putting myself first. Perhaps that's why I've always been a bit intimidated by women who can. It was such a surprising admission that for a moment I could only stare at her. This woman who had always seemed so formidable, so certain of her place in the world, was confessing to insecurity. And not just any insecurity, but one related to her perception of my strength. Thank you for being honest, I said finally. It helps me understand you better. Yes, well, she said, straightening her shoulders and reclaiming her usual composed demeanor. I should be going. Thomas will need guidance through this situation. I bit back the urge to point out that Eleanor's guidance was partly what had led us all to this point. Instead, I simply nodded. Goodbye, Eleanor. As I drove home, my mind raced with the implications of Vanessa's pregnancy. How would this affect the fragile co-parenting relationship Thomas and I were attempting to build? How would I explain it to Lily and Jack when the time came? What kind of relationship would they have with this new half-sibling? I was still wrestling with these questions when my phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. Unknown number. Hello? I answered cautiously. Rachel? It's Vanessa. Vanessa Carter. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Vanessa. I just heard the news from Eleanor. A sharp intake of breath. You've spoken to Eleanor today? We had lunch, I confirmed. Thomas texted her about your situation while we were together. God, Vanessa muttered. So the whole Wilson clan knows already. Fantastic. For what it's worth, I'm sorry, I offered. This can't be easy for you. A hollow laugh. No, it's not. Especially since I never planned to tell any of you. I was going to handle it on my own, move to Seattle where my sister lives. But my idiot coworker saw me getting sick in the bathroom and connected the dots. She thought she was doing the right thing, encouraging me to give Thomas a chance to step up. I could hear the air quotes in her voice, the bitter resignation. What do you want, Vanessa? I asked gently. From Thomas? From this situation? Nothing, she said firmly. Absolutely nothing. I don't want his money. I don't want his involvement. I don't want his family's interference. I just want to live my life on my terms. It was a sentiment I understood all too well. I respect that. But if you decide to have this baby, you should know that my children will be its half-siblings. And despite everything that's happened, I would want them to have the opportunity to know each other if you're open to it. Silence stretched across the line. That's not what I expected you to say, Vanessa finally admitted. I thought you'd be angry that you'd see this as one more betrayal. Oh, I'm angry, I clarified. But not at you, and certainly not at an innocent child. Thomas made his choices, and now we're all living with the consequences. You're a better person than I'd be in your shoes, Vanessa said quietly. Don't canonize me yet, I warned with a small laugh. I'm still figuring this out one day at a time. Aren't we all? She agreed. After a pause, she added, I'm keeping the baby. I wanted you to know that. Whatever happens with Thomas, with his family, I'm having this child. It's not how I planned to become a mother, but here we are. Here we are, I echoed. Vanessa, I meant what I said about the children, knowing each other. Whatever boundaries you need to set with Thomas and his family, I'll respect. But I hope we can find a way for these siblings to have some kind of relationship. I'd like that, she said, sounding relieved. Thank you, Rachel, for being so human about all this. After we hung up, I sat in my parked car for several minutes, trying to process everything that had happened in the span of a single day. Eleanor's unexpected vulnerability, Vanessa's pregnancy, the shifting landscape of what family would mean for Lily and Jack going forward. And through it all, a strange sense of clarity was emerging. The path ahead wasn't clear. There were still decisions to make, boundaries to establish, relationships to redefine. But for perhaps the first time since Thomas's betrayal came to light, I felt certain of my own ability to navigate whatever came next. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Can we talk? Face to face? It's important. I knew what he wanted. To discuss. I also knew this conversation would be pivotal in determining what kind of relationship we would have moving forward, not just as husband and wife, but as parents to our children and to the new life growing inside Vanessa. Tomorrow, I texted back. My house, 7 p.m. after the kids are in bed. His response was immediate. Thank you. That evening, I tucked Lily and Jack into bed with extra hugs, acutely aware of how their lives were about to change in ways they couldn't yet understand. As I closed their bedroom doors, I steeled myself for the conversation to come. The one that would determine the shape of our future as a family, whatever form that family might take. The doorbell rang precisely at 7 p.m. the next evening. Thomas stood on the porch looking haggard, the confident financial advisor replaced by a man clearly drowning in the consequences of his choices. Thank you for seeing me, he said as I let him in. I led him to the living room, gesturing for him to sit while I remained standing. I understand Vanessa is pregnant. He nodded, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Yes, about 10 weeks along, apparently. And how do you feel about that? I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. Honestly, terrified, confused, guilty. He looked up at me with bloodshot eyes. Rachel, I never meant for any of this to happen. The affair was bad enough, but a child? This complicates everything. I crossed my arms. A child isn't a complication, Thomas. It's a person. A person who will be connected to our family forever, regardless of what happens between you and me, or you and Vanessa. He blinked, clearly not expecting this response. You're right, I don't know how to handle this. What does Vanessa want? I asked, though I already knew the answer from our conversation. She says she doesn't want anything from me, he replied. No money, no involvement, nothing. She's planning to move to Seattle to be near her sister. I nodded. And what do you want? Thomas hesitated, clearly weighing his words carefully. I want to do the right thing. For everyone involved. You, our kids, Vanessa, the baby. I just don't know what the right thing is anymore. It was perhaps the most honest thing he'd said since this whole ordeal began. An admission of uncertainty rather than a practiced, people-pleasing response. The right thing starts with respecting everyone's boundaries, I said quietly, including Vanessa's. But what about the child? He asked. Don't I have a responsibility there? Yes, I acknowledged. But that responsibility might look different than what you're imagining. It might mean financial support without direct involvement. It might mean occasional visits as the child grows older. It might mean simply respecting Vanessa's wishes and letting her define the terms of your involvement. Thomas looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. How are you so calm about this? I expected you to be furious. Oh, I've been through fury, I assured him, and hurt and betrayal and every other emotion you can imagine. But right now, what matters is figuring out a path forward that minimizes the damage to all the children involved. Lily, Jack, and this new baby. He nodded slowly. You're right, as usual. A pause. Rachel, where does this leave us? Our marriage? It was the question I'd been anticipating, the one I'd spent weeks considering from every angle. Looking at Thomas now, genuine remorse in his eyes, facing the full weight of his choices for perhaps the first time, I felt a surprising clarity. Thomas, I don't know if our marriage can be saved, I said honestly. The trust between us is broken in ways that might not be repairable. But I do know that we will always be connected through our children. All of our children, including the one Vanessa is carrying. He nodded, accepting this reality with a maturity I hadn't seen from him before. So what now? Now, I said, taking a seat across from him, we talk about what co-parenting looks like going forward. We talk about how to tell Lily and Jack about their new sibling when the time comes. We talk about boundaries with your parents, especially your mother. Mom's been, he began, then shook his head. She means well, but she's making everything worse. Dad's been trying to rein her in, but you know how she gets when she thinks she's protecting family. Eleanor and I had an interesting conversation today, I told him. I think we understand each other better now, even if we don't agree on everything. Thomas looked surprised. Really? She didn't mention that when she called me about Vanessa. We have a complicated relationship, I acknowledged. But I think we both want what's best for the children, even if we define that differently. And what about what's best for you? Thomas asked unexpectedly. What do you want, Rachel? Not for the kids, not for our family image, but for yourself? The question caught me off guard. In all our years together, Thomas had rarely asked me that so directly, so sincerely. It was the question I'd been asking myself since discovering his betrayal, the one that had led me to stand up to him, to Eleanor, to the expectations that had shaped my life for so long. I want peace, I said finally. I want respect. I want the freedom to define myself beyond being your wife or Lily and Jack's mother. I want relationships based on honesty and mutual care, not obligation or appearances. Thomas absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. You deserve all of that, he said quietly. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, how much of yourself you set aside to accommodate me, to keep the peace. I took advantage of that without even realizing it. The acknowledgement, so long in coming, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you for saying that. I mean it, he insisted. And whatever happens between us, I want you to know I'm committed to changing, not just to try to win you back, but because I need to be a better person, a better father for all my children. In that moment, looking at the genuine remorse and determination in his eyes, I felt something unexpected. Hope. Not necessarily for our marriage, which might indeed be beyond saving, but for our ability to forge a new kind of relationship built on mutual respect, rather than the unbalanced dynamic we'd maintained for so long. "One day at a time," I said, softly. "That's all any of us can do." He nodded, accepting this non-answer as the most honest response I could give. One day at a time. As Thomas left that evening, I stood on the porch watching him walk to his car, struck by how much had changed in just a few weeks. The woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal that night in the kitchen seemed like a different person entirely. Someone who had accepted disrespect as the price of peace, who had made herself small to fit into others' expectations. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, clearer, more certain of her own worth. Someone who might forgive Thomas someday, not to preserve appearances or maintain the status quo, but because forgiveness was a gift she chose to give for her own healing. And when Eleanor called the next morning, her voice uncharacteristically, hesitant as she asked if she could visit the children that weekend, I found myself responding not from a place of obligation or fear, but from a position of strength. "Yes," I said. "But just you this time, Eleanor. No Thomas, no Harold. I think it's time you and I learn to navigate this new reality together, for the sake of all the children in our expanding family." Her surprise was palpable even through the phone. "All the children? You mean..." "Vanessa's baby will be Lily. And Jack's sibling," I said firmly. "Which makes that child part of our family, regardless of how we all feel about the circumstances of conception." A long pause. "You continue to surprise me, Rachel." "I continue to surprise myself," I admitted. "But I'm learning that's not a bad thing." As I hung up, I realized that the moment of truth I had been dreading, the final confrontation, the ultimate decision about my marriage, wasn't a single event, but a series of choices. Choices to honor my own worth. Choices to model healthy boundaries for my children. Choices to redefine family based on love and respect rather than obligation and appearance. And for the first time since Thomas's betrayal had shattered my world, I felt genuinely at peace with whatever might come next. 6 months can change everything. The crisp autumn day when I sat across from Eleanor at the river's edge had given way to spring, bringing with it not just new flowers and warmer temperatures, but a completely transformed landscape for our family. Lily's birthday was approaching, her 8th, and the planning had taken on a complexity I never anticipated. Not because of elaborate party themes or venue requirements, but because of the delicate dance of who would attend and how we would navigate the new family dynamics. "Mom, can I invite Dad's new baby to my party?" Lily asked one evening as we prepared dinner together. She was chopping cucumbers with careful concentration, her technique impressive for her age. I smiled at her innocent phrasing. "Sweetheart, the baby isn't born yet. Vanessa is still pregnant." "Oh." Lily considered. This, her brow furrowing. "Well, can Vanessa come then? So the baby can be there inside her tummy?" The question caught me off guard. In the months since learning about the pregnancy, we had gradually introduced the concept to the children that they would have a new half-sibling. They had processed the information with the remarkable adaptability of young minds, asking practical questions rather than dwelling on the complicated adult dynamics. "Would you like Vanessa to come?" I asked carefully. Lily nodded emphatically. She was nice when we met her at the park, and she let me feel the baby kick. The memory of that day flooded back, a cautious first meeting arranged at the neutral territory of Oak Ridge Park. Vanessa had been visibly nervous, uncertain how to interact with my children, but her natural warmth had quickly won them over, especially when she invited Lily to feel the baby moving. "I'll talk to Vanessa," I promised. "But remember, she might be too tired. Growing a baby takes a lot of energy." "I know," Lily said seriously. "That's why you got so big with Jack. You were using all your energy to grow him." I laughed. touched by her matter-of-fact understanding. Exactly. Later that evening, after the children were in bed, I texted Vanessa. Lily has specifically requested your presence and the babies at her birthday party next Saturday. No pressure at all if you're not up for it. Her response came quickly. I'm honored, she asked. Are you sure that wouldn't be awkward with Thomas there? And Eleanor? A valid concern. While my relationship with Thomas had evolved into something resembling respectful co-parenting, tensions still flared occasionally. And Eleanor? Well, Eleanor was making efforts in her own way, though she still struggled with the reality of her son's expanding family. Thomas will be fine, I texted back. As for Eleanor, she's learning to adapt. Your presence would actually be good for her. A chance to practice her new mantra. What mantra is that? Vanessa replied with a laughing emoji. Family comes in many forms, I wrote. Harold makes her repeat it whenever she starts getting judgmental. The evolution in Harold and Eleanor's relationship had been one of the most surprising developments of the past 6 months. After decades of deferring to his wife's stronger personality, Harold had finally found his voice and was using it to gently but firmly guide Eleanor toward a more inclusive, less controlling approach to family dynamics. In that case, I'd love to come, Vanessa texted. Just let me know if you need me to bring anything. I set my phone down with a small smile, marveling at how far we'd all come. If someone had told me 6 months ago that I would be casually texting my husband's pregnant ex-mistress about my daughter's birthday party, I would have thought they were insane. Yet here we were, navigating this complex situation with a grace I couldn't have imagined in those first raw days after discovering Thomas's betrayal. The journey hadn't been easy, of course. There had been painful conversations, tearful nights, moments of doubt and anger. The legal aspects of the separation had been particularly challenging. Dividing assets, establishing formal custody arrangements, untangling 11 years of shared life. Thomas and I had ultimately decided on divorce, a decision reached not in the heat of anger, but through careful reflection on what we both needed moving forward. Our relationship had been irreparably damaged, not just by the affair, but by the years of imbalance that preceded it. We both deserved the chance to build something healthier, whether alone or eventually with new partners. Yet surprisingly, our communication had improved since making that difficult decision. Without the pressure to salvage our marriage, we could focus solely on effective co-parenting and mutual respect. Thomas had continued with therapy, working to understand the patterns that had led to his destructive choices. I had started therapy as well, exploring why I had accepted less than I deserved for so long. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. It was relatively late for visitors, nearly 9 p.m. I peered through the peephole, surprised to find Eleanor, standing on my porch. Eleanor, I said as I opened the door, is everything all right? She looked uncharacteristically hesitant, clutching her handbag with both hands. May I come in? I won't stay long, I promise. I stepped aside to let her enter, noting that she hadn't arrived with her usual air of entitlement. Something had changed, or was changing, in our dynamic. The children are asleep, I explained, leading her to the living room. Can I get you anything? Tea? She shook her head, perching on the edge of the sofa. No, thank you. I needed to speak with you about Lily's birthday. I took a seat across from her, curious. What about it? Eleanor smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her skirt. Harold mentioned that Vanessa might be attending. Ah, so that was it. Lily asked specifically if she could come. I've already invited her. Eleanor nodded slowly. I see. And you're comfortable with that arrangement? I'm prioritizing what Lily wants for her birthday, I explained. She's developed a genuine interest in her future sibling, and by extension, in Vanessa. I'm not going to discourage that healthy curiosity just because the adults might feel awkward. That's Very mature of you, Eleanor acknowledged, a note of genuine respect in her voice. Thank you, I said simply. She clasped and unclasped her hands, clearly working towards something difficult. Rachel, I owe you an apology. Several, actually, but let's start with the most recent. I've been less than supportive of your handling of this situation with Vanessa and the baby. The admission was so unexpected that I momentarily struggled for a response. You've been processing a difficult situation, I said finally. We all have. True, but I've been processing it rather badly, she said with a wry smile I'd never seen before. Harold hasn't hesitated to point that out. The mention of her husband brought another question to mind. How are things between you and Harold? I've noticed a change in your dynamic. Eleanor's expression softened. Harold has found his voice after 42 years of marriage. It's been adjustment for both of us, but a necessary one. She paused. He admires you greatly, you know. Says you've shown more grace through this ordeal than anyone had a right to expect. I felt a rush of affection for Harold, who had become an unexpected ally and advocate. That's kind of him. It's true, Eleanor insisted. And he's right. Which brings me to why I'm here. She took a deep breath. I wanted to ask if there's anything specific I can do to make Lily's birthday more comfortable for everyone, including Vanessa. The offer left me momentarily speechless. This was miles away from the Eleanor who had once pressured me to forgive, Thomas regardless of my own feelings, who had tried to use my children as pawns in her campaign to preserve family appearances. That's very thoughtful, I managed. Don't look so shocked, she said with another small smile. Even old dogs can learn new tricks. Or so Harold keeps telling me. I laughed despite myself. Well, there is one thing. Vanessa might feel a bit isolated, being the newest addition to this complicated family tableau. Perhaps you could make a point of speaking with her, making her feel welcome. Eleanor nodded, taking this suggestion seriously. I can do that. She is, after all, carrying my grandchild. She hesitated. Harold and I have been discussing how we want to be involved in this new baby's life. We both agree we'd like to offer the same love and support we give Lily and Jack, if Vanessa is comfortable with that. Another surprise. Have you discussed this with Vanessa directly? Not yet, Eleanor admitted. I wasn't sure it would be welcome given our history. I think she would appreciate the gesture, I said carefully. She doesn't have much family nearby, apart from her sister in Seattle. Eleanor nodded decisively. Then I'll speak with her at the party. Properly this time, not with the condescension I showed during our only other interaction. As Eleanor prepared to leave a few minutes later, she paused in the doorway. Rachel, may I ask you something personal? Of course, I replied, curious. How did you do it? Find this strength, this grace, when you had every right to be bitter? I considered the question seriously. I suppose I realized that holding on to anger was only hurting me and, by extension, my children. And I decided that modeling forgiveness, not forgetting, not excusing, but genuine forgiveness, was more important than being right or making others suffer for their mistakes. Eleanor studied me for a long moment. You're quite remarkable, you know. I wish I'd appreciated that sooner. As I watched her walk to her car, I reflected on how this entire painful journey had revealed unexpected dimensions in all of us. Eleanor's capacity for growth, Harold's quiet strength, Thomas's ability to face his flaws honestly, Vanessa's dignity and directness, and my own resilience. A quality I hadn't known I possessed until it was tested so thoroughly. Lily's birthday. Party arrived on a perfect spring Saturday, the backyard decorated with streamers and balloons in her favorite colors. Thomas arrived early to help set up, our newly established co-parenting routine working smoothly despite the lingering sadness of our failed marriage. Vanessa texted, he told me as we arranged gift bags on the picnic table. She's running a few minutes late, but definitely coming. She sounded nervous. I imagine she is, I acknowledged. This can't be easy for her either. Thomas nodded, his expression thoughtful. Thank you for including her, for making this easier than it has any right to be. I'm doing it for Lily. And Jack, I reminded him. And for the baby. They deserve adults who can put aside their differences. Still, he insisted, not everyone would handle this with such grace. I remain in awe of your capacity for forgiveness. I was saved from responding by the arrival of the first young guests, a flurry of excited 8-year-olds bearing brightly wrapped presents. Soon the backyard was filled with children's laughter, the complications of adult relationships temporarily overshadowed by the simple joy of celebration. Harold and Eleanor arrived as I was setting out the cake, Harold carrying a large gift wrapped in princess paper, Eleanor looking uncharacteristically nervous in a casual sundress I'd never seen before. Rachel. Harold greeted me warmly, leaning in for a quick hug. Everything looks wonderful. Thank you for having us, Eleanor added, her formality belying her uncertainty about her place in this new family configuration. Of course, I said simply. You're Lily and Jack's grandparents. That hasn't changed. A flash of gratitude crossed Eleanor's face. Thank you for that. The arrival of Vanessa caused a momentary hush among the adult guests, most of whom were aware of the complicated situation, but unsure how to navigate it socially. She stood awkwardly at the gate, one hand resting on her prominent baby bump, the other clutching a neatly wrapped gift. It was Lily who broke the tension, running across the yard with her arms outstretched. Vanessa, you came. Can I feel the baby? Vanessa laughed, relaxing visibly as she accepted Lily's enthusiastic hug. Of course you can. He's been especially active today. It's a boy? Lily asked excitedly, placing her small hand on Vanessa's stomach. I'm going to have a brother? Yes, Vanessa confirmed, making her way into the yard with Lily still attached to her side. Found out last week. Your dad knows, but we were waiting for the right time to tell you and Jack. I approached them, offering Vanessa a genuine smile. Perfect timing. Lily's been asking nonstop. As we stood chatting, I noticed Eleanor observing us from across the yard, her expression unreadable. After a moment's hesitation, she smoothed her dress and walked purposefully toward us. Vanessa, she said, extending her hand formally. Thank you for coming. It means a great deal to Lily. Vanessa looked surprised, but accepted the handshake. Thank you for being welcoming. I wasn't sure. Whether I would behave myself? Eleanor finished with unexpected self-awareness. A reasonable concern, given our previous interaction, but I'm learning to adapt to our unique family circumstances. Grandma's been practicing, Lily announced proudly. Daddy says she's getting better at not being bossy. Eleanor's cheeks flushed, but surprisingly she laughed. Out of the mouths of babes. She's not wrong. The tension broken, Vanessa relaxed slightly. Well, we're all navigating unfamiliar territory here. Indeed, Eleanor agreed. After a moment's hesitation, she added, Harold and I were hoping we might discuss the possibility of being involved in the baby's life. As grandparents, if you're comfortable with that. Vanessa blinked, clearly caught off guard by the direct approach. I would be open to that conversation. The baby should know his family, all of his family. I stepped back, giving them space for this important first step toward a new kind of relationship. As I moved through the party, helping children with games and distributing snacks, I found myself repeatedly struck by the tableau we presented. Thomas chatting amiably with my friend Megan, Harold entertaining Jack and his friends with magic, Trix Eleanor and Vanessa engaged in earnest conversation by the refreshment table. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of awkwardness, brief flashes of old pain, the occasional tense silence. But there was also genuine effort on all sides, a collective commitment to creating something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. The highlight of the day came when Lily opened her presents. Among the expected toys and books was a small blue box from Vanessa. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with 2 charms, a letter L and a tiny heart. "It's beautiful," Lily breathed, immediately putting it on. "The heart opens," Vanessa explained, showing her the tiny hinge. "I thought maybe when the baby is born, we could put a tiny picture inside. So you can keep your little brother close, even when you're not together." Lily's eyes widened with delight. "Like a locket? For my brother?" "Exactly," Vanessa smiled. "So you'll always be connected." I caught Thomas watching the interaction, unexpected tears in his eyes. When our gazes met, I saw in his expression what I felt in my heart: sorrow for what we had lost, but also hope for what was being created in its place. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself standing beside Harold at the edge of the yard, watching Eleanor help Vanessa to a comfortable chair. "Remarkable, isn't it?" Harold mused. "6 months ago, I wouldn't have believed this possible." "Life has a way of surprising us," I agreed. He turned to me, his expression serious. "I want you to know how proud I am of you, Rachel. You've taught all of us, me, Eleanor, Thomas, what true strength looks like." I shook my head, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what I had to do." "No," Harold insisted gently. "You did what was right, even when it was difficult. Especially when it was difficult. You put the children first without using them as weapons. You maintained your dignity without seeking revenge. You found a way to forge something positive from circumstances that would have broken many people." His words touched something deep inside me, a recognition of how far I'd come from that night in the kitchen when Vanessa's call had shattered my world. "Thank you," I said simply. As the last guests departed and the children played with new toys in the living room, I found myself alone in the kitchen putting away leftover cake. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, one hand supporting her lower back. "Need any help?" she offered. I shook my head. "You should rest. How far along are you now?" 32 weeks, she said, easing herself onto a kitchen stool despite my suggestion. "Getting close." "Nervous?" I asked, genuinely curious about her state of mind. She laughed softly. "Terrified. But also ready, I think. My sister's moving here next month to help after he's born." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "And you know, Lily and Jack will be excited to help too. In their own way." Vanessa nodded, her expression turning serious. "Rachel, I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done. The way you've included me, how you've helped the children understand." She hesitated. "Most women in your position would have made this impossible." I leaned against the counter, considering my response carefully. I decided early on that I could either be guided by hurt and anger, or by what would ultimately be best for everyone involved, especially the children. It wasn't always easy to choose the latter, but it was always right. "Well, it's made all the difference," she said quietly. "Not just for me and the baby, but I think for Thomas too, for all of us." As Vanessa left a few minutes later, Eleanor unexpectedly offered to drive her home. "It's on our way," she insisted. "And you shouldn't be driving yourself at this stage, anyway." I watched from the porch as Harold held the car door for Vanessa, Eleanor walking beside her with unusual solicitude. Thomas stood nearby, his expression a complex mixture of emotions as he observed this unlikely alliance forming around his unborn son. "Quite a day," he commented as he joined me on the porch after they'd gone. "Indeed," I agreed. Lily loved every minute of it. "Thanks to you," he said quietly. "All of this, the civility, the new connections, it's because you chose grace over bitterness." I shook my head. "It's because all of us decided that the future was more important than the past, even your mother." Thomas laughed. "Especially my mother. I've never seen her work so hard at anything as she's working at being a better grandmother to all her grandchildren." "People can surprise you," I observed. "You certainly surprised me," he admitted. "I never realized how strong you were until I saw you stand up to me, to Mom, to all the pressure to sweep everything under the rug. I should have seen it sooner." "I didn't see it in myself either," I told him honestly. "Not until I had to." We stood in companionable silence for a moment. The air between us cleared of the resentment and pain that had clouded it for so long. We weren't friends exactly, but we had found our way to something like respect, a foundation we could build upon as we raised our children together, separately. "I should go," Thomas said finally. "Will you bring the kids over tomorrow afternoon as planned?" I nodded. "They're looking forward to it." After Thomas left and the children were in bed, I sat alone in the quiet house, reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The woman I had been, accommodating to a fault, afraid of conflict, defining herself by others' expectations, was gone forever. In her place stood someone stronger, clearer about her own worth, unafraid to set boundaries and hold others accountable. It hadn't been easy. There had been days of doubt, moments of weakness when I'd been tempted to fall back into old patterns of appeasement and self-sacrifice. But each time I'd chosen the harder path of self-respect, each time I'd insisted on being treated with dignity, I had grown more confident in my new identity. The divorce would be finalized next month. Thomas and I would officially end our marriage, acknowledging what had been true for some time, that we had grown in different directions, that the foundation of our relationship had been built on uneven ground. Yet, from those broken pieces, something unexpected had emerged. Not reconciliation, but a different kind of family. One that included Vanessa and her baby boy. One that honored Harold's quiet wisdom and even Eleanor's belated efforts to grow, beyond her controlling instincts. One that prioritized genuine connection over appearances, honesty over comfortable lies. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught sight of my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me had the same features as always, but there was something different in her eyes. A certainty, a peace that hadn't been there before. "You did it," I whispered to my reflection. "You found your voice. You chose what was right over what was easy. You built something beautiful from something broken." And that, I realized, was the greatest gift I could give my children. The example of a woman who valued herself enough to demand respect, who found strength in vulnerability, who chose forgiveness not from weakness, but from power. Outside my window, the spring night was alive with possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for growth, new chances to practice this hard-won wisdom. But tonight, in this moment of quiet reflection, I felt only gratitude for the journey that had brought me here, to this place of unexpected peace, of authentic strength, of genuine new beginnings. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories, right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.